Welcome to another deep dive.
Sounds fun.
Today, we're going way back.
Okay.
Think ancient Greece
Right.
to explore a fascinating story of philosophy, politics,
Okay.
and some seriously high stakes.
Interesting.
Our subject is Plato's journey to Syracuse,
Oh, wow.
as documented in his seventh letter.
Okay.
And you know when I say journey,
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about a physical trip.
I see.
We're talking about Plato's personal and philosophical struggles as he grapples with the messy realities of power
Right.
and the challenges of applying his ideals
Okay.
to a world that often seems allergic to them.
It's fascinating that we're working with a personal letter here,
Right.
not a detached philosophical treatise.
Exactly.
Plato really lays bare his emotions,
Yeah.
his hopes and his disappointments in this letter.
Mm-hmm.
It gives us such a unique window into his world.
And what a world it was.
Yeah.
We've got ancient Syracuse,
Okay.
ruled by a tyrant, and Plato, this idealistic philosopher,
Yeah.
trying to navigate a court filled with intrigue and danger.
Wow.
It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah, I can see that.
But before we get to all that drama,
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand how Plato got here.
Right.
He wasn't always this jaded figure disillusioned with politics.
Interesting.
In fact, he tells us in the letter that he was initially quite eager to get involved in Athenian politics.
He was young and idealistic like many of us are at that age.
Right.
He wanted to make a difference.
Of course.
But this was a turbulent time in Athens,
Mm-hmm.
right after the Peloponnesian War.
Yes.
And the political climate was,
A mess.
well, let's just say it wasn't exactly conducive to philosophical ideals.
Right. Imagine witnessing the rise of the 30 tyrants.
Oh, wow.
A brutal oligarchy that seized power
Yeah.
and unleashed a reign of terror.
Oh, my gosh.
This wasn't just some abstract political theory for Plato.
Yeah.
It was a lived experience.
Right.
One that had a profound impact on his thinking.
Absolutely. And this experience also shaped his views on leadership.
Interesting.
He was deeply disturbed by the actions of the 30 tyrants,
Yeah,
especially their attempt to implicate his mentor Socrates in their crimes.
I see.
Socrates, of course, refused to compromise his principles,
Right.
even when it meant facing death.
And this episode, I think, is really key to understanding Plato's later emphasis on the need for a philosopher king,
Okay.
a leader who combines wisdom and political skill.
Yeah,
Someone like Socrates who could stand up to tyranny
right.
and guide the state toward justice.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Plato saw firsthand the dangers of unchecked power
Mm-hmm.
and the potential for corruption that exists in any political system.
Right.
And this realization, I think, fuels his desire to find a better way,
Yeah.
to create a society where reason and virtue prevail.
So with this background in mind, let's fast forward to Plato's first trip to Syracuse.
All right.
He's around 40 years old at this point. And I can only imagine the culture shock he must have experienced.
I bet.
He describes Syracuse as a city obsessed with luxury and pleasure,
Really?
a far cry from the austere intellectual world he inhabited in Athens.
Well, remember, Plato was a student of Socrates,
Right.
who believed in living a simple life devoted to the pursuit of knowledge and virtue.
Yes.
So encountering the extravagant lifestyle of the Syracusan elite must have been quite jarring for him.
It's almost as if he walked straight into one of his philosophical dialogues.
Uh-huh.
He saw this indulgence in pleasure as a distraction from the real work of living a good life, a life guided by reason and the pursuit of wisdom.
Yeah.
It's like he's seeing his theory of the divided line playing out in real time.
Right. And amidst all this opulence, Plato meets Dion,
Theon.
a young nobleman who becomes completely enamored with his ideas.
Okay.
Dion is everything the Syracusan court is not.
Oh.
He's intellectually curious, idealistic, and hungry for knowledge.
Dion. The eager student who becomes the catalyst for so much drama.
Right.
He's completely captivated by Plato's teachings
Yeah.
and starts to dream of reforming Syracuse, of bringing his mentor's vision of a just and virtuous society to this pleasure-obsessed city.
I see.
But it's almost like by inspiring Dion,
Yeah.
Plato inadvertently sets in motion a chain of events that will have devastating consequences.
And that chain reaction starts when Dion convinces the ruler of Syracuse, Dionysius I, to summon Plato.
Dionysius the First.
Now we have to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
What were Dionysius's motives here?
Interesting question.
Was he genuinely interested in philosophy?
I don't know.
Or was this a calculated move to enhance his own prestige?
That's a good point.
I mean, having the famous Plato as a guest would certainly add a touch of intellectual gravitas to his court.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing things in Dionysius's court weren't exactly straightforward. I imagine it was a hotbed of political maneuvering, with everyone trying to get ahead and gain the tyrant's favor. Not exactly the ideal setting for calm philosophical contemplation.
Not at all. And this volatile mix of ambition power and philosophical ideals quickly leads to trouble.
Uh-oh.
Slander and suspicion start swirling around the court.
Oh, no.
And Dion, who's been advocating for reforms, falls out of favor with the tyrant.
So Dion ends up getting exiled.
Yeah.
Which had to be devastating for Plato.
Of course.
Not only had he lost a promising student,
Right.
but he was now in a very precarious position himself.
I see.
He was essentially a guest of a tyrant who was growing increasingly paranoid and unpredictable.
He was trapped.
Right.
Plato himself writes in the letter that he feared for his life during this time.
Wow.
It's a stark reminder that these philosophical debates weren't just academic exercises.
Right.
They had real-world consequences, sometimes life-or-death consequences.
So here's Plato, the champion of reason and justice, caught in a web of political intrigue, fearing for his safety. You'd think this would be enough to make him swear off any further involvement in Syracusan politics.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Right.
But, as we'll see, fate, and perhaps a bit of Plato's own idealism, had other plans in store.
Oh, I can't wait to hear what happens next.
Me too.
This is already better than any historical fiction novel I've read lately.
It really is quite a story, and it gets even more fascinating as we delve deeper into Plato's second journey to Syracuse.
So we left off with Plato escaping Syracuse, disillusioned and quite possibly traumatized by the whole experience. You'd think that would be the end of his Syracusan adventures, right?
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But a few years later, he receives another invitation. This time it's from Dionysius II.
Dionysius II.
The son of Dionysius of Phrac, who's now inherited the throne.
Oh boy, here we go again. What was it about these Syracusan tyrants that kept drawing Plato back in?
Well, the rumors were flying that Dionysius II, unlike his father, was a young man with a genuine thirst for knowledge, a passion for philosophy. And perhaps there was a part of Plato, that idealistic core, that couldn't resist the chance to mold a young ruler to try again to shape a philosopher king.
So against his better judgment, perhaps, with a sense of duty to Dion and a flicker of hope in his heart, Plato set sail for Syracuse once more.
And this second visit really becomes a test, not just for Dionysius II, but for Plato himself.
A test in what way?
Well, Plato goes in with a strategy. He wants to assess whether Dionysius II is truly committed to the philosophical life, or if this is all just a superficial fascination.
So what does he do? Give him a pop quiz on the Socratic method?
Not quite. He lays out what it truly means to be a philosopher.
Yeah.
He explains the rigor involved, the dedication, the discipline. It's like he's presenting Dionysius II with a choice: the easy path of superficial knowledge or the demanding path of true philosophical enlightenment.
And which path does our young tyrant choose?
Sadly, he opts for the easier route. He's more interested in appearing wise than actually doing the hard work of philosophical inquiry. Imagine wanting the title of philosopher king without any of the substance.
Oh, the irony. It seems history is repeating itself. Plato finds himself once again in a court where power and manipulation trump genuine intellectual curiosity.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, the issue of Dion's confiscated property keeps rearing its ugly head.
Right. Dionysius II keeps promising to return it, but keeps coming up with excuses stringing Plato along.
It's a classic power play, isn't it? Makes you wonder if Plato, despite his wisdom, was a bit naive about the true nature of power. Or perhaps he held on to that sliver of hope for too long.
Maybe he just really wanted to believe that philosophy could triumph over tyranny. But it seems like in Syracuse, at least, reality had other plans. So how does Plato finally extricate himself from this increasingly sticky situation?
Well, fortune in a rather chaotic way intervenes. Remember those mercenaries Dionysius relied on?
Oh, right, the ones who basically propped up his rule.
Exactly. They end up staging an uprising, demanding higher pay. Syracuse descends into chaos. It's a full-blown mutiny.
Talk about a lucky break for Plato. Did he just slip out the back door while everyone was distracted?
Pretty much. He sees his opportunity and seizes it. He even mentions a close call with some soldiers who weren't too fond of him. He had to rely on the help of some friends in Terrace to secure passage on a ship back to Greece.
Wow, what a dramatic escape. It sounds like something straight out of an action movie.
It really does. And this escape highlights the climate of fear and paranoia that permeated Syracuse under tyrannical rule. Even Plato, the esteemed philosopher, wasn't immune to the dangers.
So he makes it back to Greece safe but undoubtedly shaken. And what about Dion? What's his reaction to all of this?
Well, Plato bumps into him at Olympia, and as you can imagine, Dion is furious. He's been betrayed, his property stolen, his hopes dashed.
I bet he was ready to storm Syracuse and take back what was rightfully his.
He was. He wants revenge. He proposes gathering an army and launching a counterattack. But here we see a key difference between Plato and Dion.
What do you mean?
Plato, despite everything he's been through, still refuses to condone violence. He's witnessed firsthand the horrors of war and political turmoil. He believes in achieving justice through reason and law, not brute force.
So he tries to talk Dion out of it.
He does. He urges him to find a peaceful resolution. But Dion, consumed by anger and a thirst for retribution, isn't persuaded. He decides to go ahead with his plan without Plato's support.
Oh, no, that doesn't sound good. What happens?
It's a tragic ending. Dion does succeed in overthrowing Dionysius II, but his victory is short-lived. He's assassinated, leaving Syracuse in even greater turmoil. It's a stark reminder that even with the best intentions, the pursuit of power can corrupt, and violence often begets more violence.
It's a heartbreaking end to Dion's story, and for Plato it must have been a profound disappointment. Another reminder of the limits of philosophy in the face of raw ambition and political maneuvering.
It's a sobering lesson. But even amidst this tragedy, Plato doesn't abandon hope entirely. He still believes in the power of ideas to shape a better future. And this is where his reflections in the seventh letter become especially relevant for us today.
You mean, despite all the chaos and disappointment, there's still something valuable we can learn from Plato's Syracusan adventures?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The seventh letter isn't just a historical account. It's a reflection on human nature, on the challenges of leadership, on the eternal struggle between power and virtue. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some of these timeless lessons and how they might guide us in navigating the complexities of our own world.
It's almost tragic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Plato goes into Syracuse with this noble goal
Right.
to guide a potential philosopher king
Yeah.
to help create a just and virtuous society.
Mhm.
And it all ends in violence, betrayal, and ultimately failure.
Right.
But you're saying there's still wisdom to be gleaned from this experience,
Absolutely.
even from this failure.
I think one of the most powerful things about Plato's seventh letter is its honesty. He doesn't shy away from acknowledging his own misjudgments, his own perhaps naive hope that reason and philosophy could easily triumph over the allure of power.
It's almost like he's offering a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Not just about the dangers of tyranny,
Right.
but about the challenges of putting philosophical ideals into practice
Mm-hmm.
in a world that often resists them.
Exactly. And he also gives us some very concrete advice on how to navigate this messy world.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Remember, at the end of the letter, he's addressing Dion's friends and family,
Okay.
who are understandably grieving
Of course.
and seeking guidance. And what does he tell them?
What does he tell them?
He doesn't advocate for more violence, for more revenge.
It urges them to choose a different path, right?
Yes.
One based on law and justice,
Exactly.
not on the whims of a single ruler.
Precisely. He says, do not enslave Sicily or any other state to despots, this my counsel, but to put it under the rule of laws.
Yeah.
Imagine that the victors demonstrating even greater respect for the law than the vanquished.
Wow.
It's a powerful idea, and it makes you think about how we, even in our everyday lives, can model the kind of behavior we want to see in the world.
It's like he's saying that true justice can't be achieved through force or domination.
Right.
It has to be built on a foundation of shared principles,
Mhm.
on a commitment to the common good.
And he's not just talking about abstract legal frameworks here. He's also emphasizing the importance of personal virtue, especially for those in positions of power. He stresses the need for self-control, for rising above the temptation to use power for personal gain.
So it's not enough to have good laws.
No.
You also need virtuous individuals who are willing to uphold those laws and act in accordance with them.
Right. And this idea ties back to his concept of the philosopher king, someone who embodies wisdom, justice, and temperance qualities that seem all too rare in today's world, wouldn't you say?
You're telling me?
Right.
But I guess that's the challenge Plato sets before us. He's not giving us easy answers. He's inviting us to grapple with these timeless questions about power, virtue, and the kind of society we want to create.
And he's also urging us to look inward, to examine our own motivations and actions. He reminds us that the pursuit of a just and virtuous life is an ongoing process, a constant struggle to align our actions with our ideals.
I love that idea that this isn't just about changing the world around us.
Yeah.
It's also about changing ourselves.
Exactly. And that inner work, I think, is where Plato's seventh letter becomes most relevant for us today. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable,
Yeah.
where we're bombarded with information and conflicting ideologies,
Right.
it's easy to feel lost, to succumb to cynicism or despair.
But Plato's story reminds us that even in the face of disappointment, even in the midst of political turmoil, we can still choose to live a life guided by principles, by a commitment to truth and justice, and the pursuit of a better world.
And maybe, just maybe, by embracing those ideals, by striving to embody those virtues in our own lives, we can each contribute to creating a world that's a little bit closer to the one Plato envisioned, a world where reason triumphs over tyranny and where justice prevails for all.
That's a beautiful thought.
Yeah.
And a powerful call to action.
Mm.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. I know I'll be thinking about Plato's seventh letter and its timeless lessons for a long time to come.
It's been a pleasure. And I hope our listeners will be inspired to explore Plato's works for themselves and to discover the enduring wisdom they hold.
That's it for this deep dive. Until next time.